Tanev in behind for Radek Faksa. Robertson trying to work it out for Johnston. Big hit there in behind, and Cogliano zooms it ahead. Wood wins speed. Wood drives in. Backhand. Score! Miles Wood, the hero in overtime.
Overtime, very much the call of the day on Tuesday evening. Welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation Elliottes. We're going to get to the double overtime that we saw between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers in a moment. But first, it only took one. But what a comeback by the Colorado Avalanche. They go down 3 Cobb, claw their way back. Nathan MacKinnon ties things up early in the third period. It goes to OT, and Miles Wood from Andrew Cogliano. Miles Wood is the OT hero in this one. What a comeback on the road for the Colorado Avalanche.
Such a wild game with swings, Jeff. Yeah. Dallas dominated early. Colorado, I mean, nobody thought the game was over. Even if it was 3-0 Dallas, you're looking at Colorado and who they've got on their lineup, and they're saying, okay, they can still come back in this. But what really shocked me, Jeff, after the 3-0 lead is how few chances Dallas had. Like for the second and third period, they really didn't have many great chances until late in the third period.
They were hanging on.
Yes.
Like Nichushkin and Makar scored those goals, and like Dallas is hanging on for dear life here. And this is after listen, the Suter goal, okay, point shot, floater, Wyatt Johnson with a nice save, Jamie Benn on the power play. And you're thinking, okay, Dallas is rolling here. And then by the end of the second period, you're saying to yourself, Dallas is just trying to keep their head above water here now all of a sudden.
Yes.
Like Colorado is just swimming all over them here.
And then at the beginning of overtime, Dallas got the first 5 shots. Mm-hmm. And you think, okay, they're right, they're going to win. And then the Avalanche get 4 out of the next 5 and win the game. And Miles Wood beats Miro Heiskanen in a race to the puck. You know, who was picking that? If those two guys
he is
were
fast,
horses,
Miles Wood is quick. He's got quick feet.
I'm not saying he's slow. I'm not calling him Tortoise Miles Wood here, Jeff. I'm just saying that nobody expects Heiskanen to lose to anybody. Yeah. Even Connor McDavid, Heiskanen has slowed down from time to time. You know, that's a game. That's a game, no question. Now, Dallas has come back from this before. Obviously,
sure, no problem.
They were down 2-0 against Vegas, but you know that if they lose the series, they're going to look back at game 1 and they're going to say, oh, that cost us big. And, you know, the other thing about this is that, you know, Dallas, the thing I wonder about here about both Dallas and Boston is, you know, they're not going to get any rest.
Yeah.
You know, Colorado got a bit of rest. Florida got a bit of rest. Dallas is not going to get rest.
Did you not see in that first, did it not feel to you like Colorado had too much rest? Like, what was it, eight days for the Avalanche? Did you not say to yourself in that first period, holy smokes, like, that's too much rest for this team? I know you want an easy series along the way and try to get it done in 4 or 5, but they sat for a while, 8 days between you. Did you not think in the first period, yeah, you know what? Colorado is showing that that's too long to rest.
Maybe, but Bieksa does have a theory that if you have a quick turnaround from game 7 to game 1, at least from when he played, he thinks it doesn't hurt you. It thinks it catches up with you later in a series, like games 2 or 3 or 4. So I think that's an interesting theory, and I would always defer to somebody who played. To me, it was just weird, the swings of momentum in that game. You know, Ottinger's worst game against Vegas was game 1. So you sit there and you're hoping that that's an omen. You know, when it's 3-0, you're thinking maybe from here on in the Avalanche just forfeit games 1 of a series because that was their worst game against Winnipeg too. But Georgiev settled down, and not so much that he settled down, but Colorado settled him down because he just, as we said, he didn't have a lot to do. But once again, Jeff, you take a look at the goal scorers. It's Nichushkin. Yep. A goal and assist. He was a major difference against Winnipeg. Like, look at the goals. Nichushkin from Makar and McKinnon. Makar from Nichushkin and Rantanen. McKinnon from Rantanen and Makar. And then Wood from Cogliano and Girard to win it. The big dogs ate. The big dogs ate a big T-bone.
They did. Let me ask you about, as you like to say, controversy in this game.
Yep.
I would hate to be a referee who has to make a judgment on embellishment. What did you make of the Rupe Hintz embellishment call in the third period? Did Manson hook him? Absolutely.
I didn't like it.
Did he embellish it? Man, I would hate to make that call. Oh, man.
I didn't agree. Like, did you think that was bad embellishment? I didn't.
No, I don't. And that's why I'm like, but the thing is, okay, to perfect honesty here, you know what I thought? I thought that was a situation where the official said, we got a close game here. We got a tied game. We got Manson. I'm going to sit in the box for a hook. I got to call that one. Hang on. I can offset it with an embellishment because it looks close enough. It's the easy way out.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if the other game we're going to talk about here, which is Rangers Carolina, I think they could have called more embellishment than they did, and they didn't do it. Mm-hmm. They called a ton of penalties. They called a ton of penalties in that game, and we'll talk about it more there, even in overtime.
Essentially, what Elliott's saying is we'll complain about anything at any point. There's no real standard for us. We'll just bitch at something that stares us in the face.
Well, it comes down to which referees you have, and all these teams know that there's a book on these officials, and some call games one way and some call games another way. Officiating becomes even more of a firestorm at this time of year. Like, I'll tell you this, one guy I actually kind of feel a bit badly for is Chris Rooney. Okay, because whenever he does a game involving the Bruins,
he hits David Pasternak.
he's a Boston area guy.
Yeah.
I get people who say to me, "Well, he shouldn't ever referee the Bruins because he's from Boston."
That's ridiculous.
And I get people who say to me, "Well, he bends over backwards to penalize the Bruins to show he's not biased because he's from Boston."
Can't win.
Like it's a complete total no-win situation for the guy. But I wasn't crazy about that one in the moment. And one of the things, what did Rick Tocchet talk about when the league discussed going into round 2 with the teams in the series? What did they talk about? They talked about embellishment. So it's uppermost in these officials' minds. Whenever something is sort of like the call that everyone's thinking about here, or you get told to watch it, you're watching it. You are sensitive to it. It's like an old college basketball coach, Abe Lemons. He would go to coaching clinics and he would say, the worst thing you can do to your players is tell them what not to think about. You want an example? And everybody would go, sure. And he'd say, okay, everybody here, close your eyes. Yep. Don't think of a brown cow.
Yeah.
What's everybody thinking about? A brown cow. They're all thinking about a brown cow. So you've warned them about embellishment. They're all thinking about embellishment. Now, Jeff, remember when we did that Kevin Fiala, referee Gord Dwyer embellishment thing from Game 5?
Oh, yeah.
Let's just say that the next day, a lot of opinions were shared.
Was it Elliotte Stan the Bunch?
It was interesting. Like, there were some people I thought that would have been happy with it, weren't very happy with it. And there were some people who I didn't think were going to be very happy with it who were like, yeah, I don't mind that, but still, I would kind of prefer that be everyone's dirty little secret, right? So I think in particular, embellishment embarrasses people, and I just didn't like it at that time. I didn't agree with that call.
I get it. Game 2 of this exciting series goes Thursday. Okay, as we mentioned, it was a double night of overtimes on Tuesday, Elliotte. We've already covered off the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. How about a wild one between the New York Rangers and the Carolina Hurricanes? Can you make the arguments that despite the fact that the New York Rangers now have a 2-0 series lead by virtue of a Vincent Trocheck overtime goal to lead the Rangers to a 4-3 victory on Tuesday night, a pair of goals by Alexis Lafreniere, Chris Kreider with a big one to tie it as well, Igor Shesterkin facing 57 shots. Can you not make the point that the Rangers are up 2-0, but they've been outplayed in both games?
This series is not over.
Oh, not even close.
Dallas came back from 2-0 down, and they lost the first two at home. Carolina isn't exactly in the same spot with the first two games on the road, but this series is not over. Carolina could come back and win this. Now, some people agreed, some people disagreed. I thought that Game 2, Rangers-Hurricanes, was the best game of the playoffs so far.
It was
Agree
excellent.
or disagree?
Yes, it was. I could not agree more.
Well, then you may continue on this podcast.
Well, it was great. It was a wonderful game that had a little bit of everything in it. And again, the performance of the night, with all due respect to Vincent Trocheck, with all due respect to Alexis Lafreniere, and I'm looking at you as well, Jake Ensel, with your pair, Igor Shesterkin
and
was
Anderson.
the player of the game. Anderson was good too, but come on, dude. He stood in front of 57 shots.
Yeah,
this was a Shesterkin game.
Obviously, Jeff, I'm not disagreeing with that. I just thought Anderson was also tremendous. I thought the goalies were fantastic, but what a mean game. I wonder if actually something was said during the game to the two teams, because Svechnikov hit Shesterkin and he didn't look like he was really trying to get away from him. Cooley got a penalty for skating into Anderson, even though he was trying to score. There were a couple other situations where the goalies got bumped, and that's one where I did wonder if the officials said, hey, guys, enough with the goalies. But it was a mean game. These teams were legitimately trying to hurt each other.
Well,
and Trouba...
Oh, yeah, that's
first
what I
of
want
all,
to get to.
Natchez... He was a train on the track. He heard it coming. He felt it coming. He got down, and then he was lucky the skates didn't slice him on the way back. Like, what a mean, nasty, awesome hockey game.
The way that I saw that play was Natchez lost an edge and went down, but Trouba thought that Natchez was bailing on the hit. Did you see it the same way? No,
I think he heard him coming. I think he bailed on the hit.
You think he did that deliberately, eh?
Well, I do. I mean, look, he was trying to stop. I'm looking at the replay right now. He's trying to stop, and he sees... Maybe he lost an edge, but I think he sees Trouba coming and feels Trouba coming, and he's like, whoa, if I don't protect myself, I'm dead here. Now, Kevin initially thought he low-bridged him. I completely disagree with that.
No. Lost an edge.
Yeah, I'm not even sure he lost an edge. I think it was more like he said, I feel this guy coming, I'm getting out of the way. Yeah, and I don't blame him. Like, Trouba could have hit him into next week.
Yeah, he really could have. Share your thoughts about the double OT hero, Vincent Trocheck. Not just the player and the double OT goal and all of that. What about the thumbs up to Gensel? The patented Vincent Trocheck thumbs up.
35 minutes. If you're going to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. He did. He led everybody in ice time, and he won the game. And the celebration in the corner with all the fans there was an awesome celebration. That's the way I feel, Jeff. If you're gonna be mouthy or taunt or do whatever you're gonna do, you have to back him up, and he did. Now, fallout. What did you think of the penalty in overtime?
A little bit soft for my liking.
There were a lot of penalties in overtime here, and I did think, Jeff, there were too many. There were too many for my liking. The one I completely agreed with was Panarin. When on that 2-on-1, Panarin water skied so badly, I thought he was going to drop a skate and do a slalom. That's how much water skiing he was doing.
He got a hook
into that one.
Into Nature's pretty good. Yes, I'll give you that one.
The cross-checking one that led to the game-winning goal. I mean, there were a lot of penalties called in this game. I was watching Mark Messier, one of his hits, and he hated the call. But the thing that was most interesting to me was he talked about the cross check being a push and not quote unquote like a real cross check. I had someone who texted me and said, that's crazy. A cross check's a cross check. And I said, no.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. And
by the way, if anyone knows cross checks, it's Mark Messier, David Oliver on line 2.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people who played, especially in Messier's era, they saw a cross check as two different things. There were two different types of cross checks. One of them was the actual cross check where you smashed your stick into somebody's back. And or you smashed your stick into somebody's chest or wherever you did it, someone's head, probably not, but someone's head. You shouldn't, but it did happen from time to time. Like a hard smash, a full extension of the arms. To those players, and there are some players in this day and age who still feel the same way, that's a cross check. That's a penalty. But there are others who feel strongly that there's also what could technically be defined as a cross check, but it's like a push. It's like a slight push, or you're using it to move someone somewhere on the ice. And those players don't feel that that's a cross-checking penalty. That's not a full extension. That's not an attempt to injure or physically dominate someone. Those are battles for position where the arms don't get fully extended or you don't use a super ton of force. And a couple of years ago, when they had that cross-checking crackdown, that's one of the two things they talked about. Number one was the battle in front of the net versus cross-checks elsewhere on the ice. They were willing to be more accepting of the battle in front of the net as opposed to cross checks around the ice, and Shays was not in front of the net. But the other thing they talked about was more of a push versus a physical attempt to damage someone with your stick or knock someone down with your stick. And so when I heard Messier talking about this, I understood exactly what he was talking about. He said that was not a cross check. And I know that should be penalized. And while I understand not everybody sees it that way, I believe there is a huge segment of player who does agree with him.
So what happens now? Game 3, the venue changes to Raleigh. What do you expect?
It'll be home ice. I mean, I don't think they're switching goalies.
Nope.
You can't blame Anderson for this. You can't. I don't think you're looking at it and saying, Kochetkov, you're our guy. I'm staying with the guy who's played very well in 2 games. I mean, what else are you going to do here? I mean, you're sticking with Anderson. He's been good. The one thing I wonder about here is, do they go back to Kuznetsov? Is this just a one game? You've got to be a lot smarter than that, because you can never have enough scoring, and they had plenty of chances to win that game. But I think if it was me, I would want Kuznetsov in the lineup after this benching. I would say, okay, you're getting another chance. You need that skill. One other thing about Kuznetsov, and the reason I think you see him back in, is Comtois only played 619, right? So I got to think they're going to put Kuznetsov back in because he can give you more of that. But the other ice time that really stood out for me, Kotkaniemi, 9:15, and only 3 shifts in the overtime.
That's not a lot of shifts, Elliotte.
No, that's not good. That's not good. The Hurricanes are going to need more there.
Surprised that Laviolette played Rempe?
Jeff, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, sometimes the benches get shortened. That's not really a conversation about him, as that just happens in the playoffs. But again, I thought he was under control. Like, that game had a chance to get really out of hand. And Rempe, I thought, was very calm, didn't do anything that hurt his team, played it smart. You know, after Svechnikov got the penalty for tripping Shesterkin, Rempe gave a bit of a snow shower to Anderson, but he didn't do anything undisciplined. He played it smart, and that's what he needs to do. Now, Ron and Jen thought that play with Shesterkin from Svechnikov should have been a major. I didn't.
I don't know about that one. That's a little bit too much sugar in the coffee for me on that one.
Yeah, I thought it was a minor. And boy, the Rangers are lucky that Fox did not connect with that swing, because then you really have a problem. If he connects with that, you look at what happened to Pietrangelo. He got suspended last year for something kind of similar. They would have had no choice if he connects with that to suspend Fox. And that's just bad for everybody.
Okay, with that, let's get to another big story from Tuesday, and that was the NHL Draft Lottery. And the big winner, surprise, surprise, the San Jose Sharks. Macklin Celebrini going home. The junior Shark is heading back to the Bay Area, Elliotte Friedman. It's how it should have played out. I think we wonder now, San Jose gets a first overall pick. They'll take Macklin Celebrini. Does that mean that Will Smith is coming out as well? So many different questions now fall. And you look around the Western Conference too, don't you get the feeling that the last thing the Western Conference needs is another elite level centerman to join Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and Mark Scheifele and Anze Kopitar and Jack Eichel and Rupe Hintz and Elias Pettersson and Connor Bedard and Robert Thomas? Holy smokes, down the middle, the West is awesome for age.
Jeff, you know who would disagree with the premise of your question?
Who's that?
The San Jose Sharks, because they didn't have anybody like that. You just named
they got Will Smith coming.
Yes, they do, but they'll take Celebrini.
Of course. I'm saying that tongue in cheek. Good. Listen, the San Jose Sharks
that was a terrible joke, Jeff. That was.
I was just saying, there's a lot of good centers in the Western Conference. They're trying to be creative and a little bit flowery. But listen, it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning here on a Wednesday morning as we record this thing. I'm a little bit punch drunk and a little giddy after watching all these overtimes. So forgive me, Elliotte. Forgive me.
No, you are not forgiven. You go to the penalty box and you feel shame.
Feel ashamed.
I thought it was justice a bit. I think San Jose really needs the player. To me, if you asked me anybody in the league, first, everybody would want Celebrini. Everybody could use Celebrini. But if there was a team that needed to win that lottery and get that player, it was the San Jose Sharks. Because one, we've talked about how they were kind of half pregnant in a world where you can't be half pregnant.
To start the season.
Yeah. Now they're fully pregnant. Okay. Oh. They're not half pregnant anymore. They're fully pregnant. They're going into the rebuild, and he kickstarts their rebuild. And the second thing is he's a local guy.
Yeah.
He's got history in the region. It's not just a good young player who has a chance to be a franchise cornerstone. It's a good young player with a chance to be a franchise cornerstone from the region, in a region who badly needs someone like that.
Yep.
This is a fifth deck home run for the Sharks, a huge night for their franchise. If the NHL fixed lotteries, then they would have fixed this one for San Jose. He was obviously very excited. I heard the Celebrini family, his father, Rick, works for the Golden State Warriors, as most fans know by now. He said that Celebrini, I guess, in an interview, is going to live at home. I wonder if Macklin gets a vote on this. Does he want to live at home, or does he want to live somewhere else? But this was a huge victory for San Jose, and really, what it does is it restarts and it re-energizes the franchise. And one thing I said on air, and I do believe this, it makes their coaching job a little bit more attractive, because now. And, obviously your coaching hire is very important for a lot of different reasons, but now it becomes even more important because whoever this is going to teach Macklin Celebrini the ropes. And I wonder if it changes at all the way the Sharks look at this job.
You're right. This is the home run. This would be one where you look at and you say, okay, thumb on the scale here. You got the storybook finish. You got the conclusion that you wanted. The struggling team gets the local boy. The local boy goes home, even though he's born in British Columbia. We all know the San Jose story with Macklin Celebrini at this point. It's a great story. He's a wonderful player. It's a great story. They'll build the whole thing around him and Will Smith and continue to build the pieces of the San Jose Sharks here. I'm having a really hard time being in any way, shape, or form cynical about this one. Like, Elliotte, there are just some hockey stories you look at and you just go, yeah, that's right. That's the way it should be. Congratulations to everybody involved. That's how I feel about this one.
I would agree with that. A couple other things. I know there was a big conspiracy theory about the picture that John Buccigross tweeted out.
Oh my goodness.
And I understand because of some things that have happened in the past couple of years that the NHL is sensitive to this. But one thing is they don't do the lottery is televised at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific. They actually do the lottery at 5:45 p.m. now, and they lock everybody in the room and nobody's allowed to contact anyone. They film it. They put it up now on all their websites. They invite media there. Greg Wyshynski, your old buddy, was there. Sheng Peng, who covers the Sharks, was there. Whatever Buccigross tweeted out, it was a rehearsal. Like, that was not like a couple hours. Like first of all, I didn't realize
Elliotte, we do it at the draft every year.
Yeah. Like, I didn't realize he took it down. I was like, why did he take it down? Like, that's not the real thing. People are texting me and saying, did ESPN just spoil the draft? I'm like, no, they haven't even done it yet. So I thought the whole thing was a little bit crazy. And I'll tell you something else. A few years ago, when it did leak out accidentally, the next year, they put up what's called a slate. And a slate is something that goes on all the TV monitors. It's just like, when your TV used to freeze and it said, please stand by, that's called a slate. They put up a slate with a fake draft lottery result to see if anyone sent it out anywhere. And it did happen. And they were like, okay, now we know how even more careful how we have to be. There's no way they would have blown it like that early. I was really surprised at the entire controversy.
Okay, Elliotte, some news. Made official by the Ottawa Senators on Tuesday. They have hired Travis Green, as you and I talked about on the radio show on Monday afternoon, hired Travis Green as their head coach. This was interesting. We all wondered, names like Craig Berube early in the season. We wondered about names like John Gruden, head coach of the AHL Marlies with the Toronto organization. How did they land on Travis Green? Why did they land on Travis Green? And what other names should we keep in mind here? Like, I still do think that somewhere down the road, Gruden is involved in coaching in some capacity in Ottawa.
Yes.
I feel same way about Jay McKee as well, whether it's Ottawa, whether it's AHL Belleville, I don't know. But what should we be aware of in all of this process?
I think they had extended conversations with Craig Berube. We talked about it on your show the other day. I think there were two issues. Number one, I don't think that Ottawa, and these are just conversations with other coaches in the circles, that it wasn't seen as Berube's number one choice. I think he felt there were other options that he thought were potentially better for him. I know there's a lot of talk in Ottawa about money, and I don't think it's that simple. I think that Berube Berube signed a contract in St. Louis that he's still under, and he feels that is his worth, and he can afford to be a pick and choose, because if there's anything he doesn't like, then he can just say, look, I'll wait for longer. He's being paid next year by the Blues if he doesn't coach. So I think he can afford to be a little bit choosy. I think he can afford to say, this is my number. And I don't think it's necessarily that the Senators are being cheap here, but I think they knew what the number was going to be. And I think they just felt that it wasn't where they wanted to go to. Plus, it was the fact that I think they sensed that they were not necessarily his number one choice. And I think that's important. And so they go to Green. They interviewed a lot of people. I think this about Green. When Travis, I threw out the New Jersey thing. That was a half-season thing. And I don't think it's a fair indicator of Green as a coach.
So you throw it out. You throw it out like don't count that on the resume here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously you look at it. If he'd done anything that was a huge red flag, then you say, oh, okay, we can't do this. But I'm not of the opinion that anything like that happened. When he got to Vancouver, Vancouver was an organization that was not as stable as it is right now. During the time there was a power struggle upper in the office between, the owner and Trevor Linden and Jim Benning. Like, things just were not that stable. And, he had Thatcher Demko when he was young, and he certainly saw the potential in Demko. He had Hughes and Pettersson when they were young, and he certainly saw the potential in those guys, and he drove them hard. And, I think it's interesting. After I went on your show and talked about this, I got a call from someone who was close to that situation, and he said that the thing that will help Green in Ottawa in this case is that those players that he's going to be dealing with are going to be a little older in Ottawa than the guys in Vancouver were. I think Green was a huge adjustment for Hughes and Pettersson. Not that they were unwilling or anything like that, because I think those guys know that you have to get pushed. But I think it was early in their career, and he grinded them, and it was a big challenge for them. I think they have a better understanding now. Those two guys, they want to win, and they want to be great players. I think they were, I don't know if unprepared is the right word, but I think it was a real jolt going to them. The type of training camp they had, like the Sedins have said that was one of their hardest training camps, and they played for John Tortorella. So I think Green will learn from what those players liked and didn't like. And also I think the Senators will benefit from the fact that the players that Green has to make better and more cohesive are older and a bit more experienced than those two guys were there. So, that every coaching hire is a risk. I think, we'll see where this goes. I think some of the reaction is a little bit over the top, but Green's personality is I think what the Senators wanted. I think the other thing here too is, and I always look for connections. Travis Green played with Keith Tkachuk in Arizona, and I kind of look at it and wonder, is there a little bit of Keith Tkachuk saying, I know this guy, and I can, and it works for us. You can't let the captain pick the coach, but you want to know that there's not going to be any preconceived problems. And, I just can't help but wonder, it's my opinion. I'm sure people will run wild with the conspiracy theories, but it's my opinion that Green and Tkachuk having a bit of a history can't be a bad thing here.
No, not at all. I do wonder about the assistants. I wonder if Daniel Alfredson is still involved on the bench. Certainly he'll be involved in a player development capacity as well. And I think it's interesting. I think and you and I talked about this Tuesday on the radio show, like the movement towards hiring coaches with I don't know, Elliotte, what do we say, stiffer spine, seems to be very much a thing in the NHL right now. The pendulum is swinging back.
Well, you know what? I just believe this, Jeff, that I think there's a chance someday that I may end up going into management when they throw me off TV. I'm 53 years old. My day is coming. And I've wondered, and someone asked me once, would you ever want to go into management? And initially I said no, and I thought about it. And I said, maybe I might. And one of the things I said, they said, what kind of boss will you be? And I said, I really don't know the answer, but I know this. Some people are going to like me and some people are going to hate me. And I'm probably going to see things that I didn't understand before that I'm going to understand better once I'm in that seat. But the one thing I did say is that I will be encouraging, but I will also be honest, because that's the way I expect to be led. If I'm having a rough day or I'm having a rough show, I think it's always good when somebody says, hey, just pull yourself through it, or this is what you need to do. But when I stink, I expect someone to tell me I stink. And many of you on social media do. So I thank you for that. I think, Jeff, like, you're never going to be successful unless you have those brutally honest people in your corner. So someone who can say to you, Elliotte or Jeff or Dom, you're being a complete idiot, or what you're doing is not good enough to be successful. And sometimes in the moment, we really hate those people, but almost always later, we say, boy, that person had our best interest in mind. As long as you don't cross the line, we recognize those people have our best interests in mind.
You'll send for me, right? Like when you get this like big shot management job, like you'll send for me, right, Freach?
I think you're going to make an excellent intern.
Sticking with coaches, Drew Bannister no longer interim. He gets the St. Louis Blues job. So now we look at New Jersey and San Jose, and we're going to get to LA here in a second, and Columbus and Winnipeg and Seattle as still having vacancies. But Drew Bannister with the official business card Tuesday.
Jeff, I'm not surprised that they went with Drew Bannister. And one of the reasons I'm not surprised is there wasn't a lot of news coming out of St. Louis. I think they interviewed Todd McClellan. I think they were a team that talked to David Carl from the University of Denver, and we'll talk a bit more about him in a minute. But I don't think there was a lot of depth in terms of what was coming out of there. And some of it was because Doug Armstrong tends to be very quiet and very secretive. He likes to keep the Blues out of the news in that way. Also because I think Bannister, if he wasn't already a legitimate candidate, and the way that Armstrong talked at the media conference, he sure was, he became, I think, over the last little while, really the lead candidate. I think the one thing there that might have changed everybody's mind is it certainly isn't a huge coincidence that they finalized this after Boston won. I think there's a lot of people kind of wondering if the Bruins had lost to the Maple Leafs in the first round, would Jim Montgomery have been available and would the Blues have pursued him? So I'm not surprised about Bannister for all of those reasons. As we talked about with Ottawa, I hate the way this gets portrayed or warped or whichever word you want to use. But the Blues, I don't think were in position to spend top dollar on a coach. You know, if Berube doesn't get hired here or chooses not to take a job, they're still going to be paying him. So I think that was a factor. Bannister gets a 2-year deal to continue to show that he's the right guy there. A couple of other things that really stood out to me, Jeff, that are not necessarily about the coach. Number one, Armstrong mentioned that he had Bannister talk to some various members of his team, not the players, but Armstrong's management team. And one of the people he mentioned was Alex Steen. And a couple people said to me that this is something worth watching, that Alex Steen, who was a longtime player with the Maple Leafs and the Blues and won a Stanley Cup with the Blues, is now somebody who may be growing in St. Louis management and potentially someone who could be groomed to be a future general manager. So I think that's something worth watching. You know, a couple of people were saying it's not a coincidence that Steen's name came up as someone Doug Armstrong wanted Bannister to meet with. So just wanted to add that on the pod. I think also, you know, Jordan Kyrou scored 37 goals under Berube the year before. Everybody remembers how poorly this year started for him. You know, the fact that he had that very emotional night after Berube was fired. Kyrou seemed to really respond to Bannister, who did make the team a bit more offensive after a slow start. He finished with 31 goals. I would think that, you know, the fact that Kyrou recovered very nicely under him would also be a factor. He's a pretty big part of the Blues' future. They need him to be, and he responded. I mentioned David Carl there a couple minutes ago. It seems very likely that he's going to be returning to the University of Denver.
Elliotte, he kind of has a great setup there. Like a really, really good setup. I don't think that should surprise anybody, but nonetheless.
Oh, yes, he does, and he knows it. It's a great setup for him and his family. And also, people talk about Carl as a hugely competitive guy. He has a chance to win back-to-back World Juniors this year. People think that is very meaningful for him. And it probably worked out very well for the University of Denver. Not that Carl was likely to leave anyway, but that kind of carrot was put in front of him because that would really motivate him. Just a couple other names I would say to keep up in coaching circles. Mentioned on your radio show earlier today, Berube and the Devils. I've been on that. Jay Woodcroft, I think, is a key part of that search as well. Just a couple other names that I'm hearing too. Ryan Warsofsky. I think he was an assistant in San Jose. He was a real up-and-comer a couple years ago when he was hired on David Quinn's staff. Unfortunately, a lot of those guys are in limbo now because of the coaching change. But I've heard he's gotten at least one interview. I don't know if that's with the Sharks or not, but I heard he's gotten at least one interview. And I had a couple of people say to me that you should be looking around at Gerard Gallant and DJ Smith too. Now, I haven't pinned down exactly where yet, but I had someone say to me, you should start chasing those particular situations. So we'll see where all this goes.
Okay, Los Angeles Kings here, quickly. And we'll see what happens with the coaching decision. It sounds like Jim Hiller is being given some serious consideration by Rob Blake. Rob Blake had some interesting comments a couple of days ago about his team, whether it was no buyout for Pierre-Luc Dubois, whether it was the priority about getting a Quentin Byfield deal done, whether it was blending in younger players into the lineup, whether it was, I don't know how you see it otherwise, taking a swipe at Artur Kaliev, moving away from the 1-3-1. What did you pull out of the Rob Blake presser the other day?
A couple of things. The Dubois thing was obviously the biggest news, that they weren't considering doing that. I'm not surprised that Blake is staying on for another year based on the conversation we had last week. We talked on Monday's pod that people had said there was no chance they were going to buy out Dubois, and he made that pretty clear. I do think Hiller has a decent chance at keeping that job. I don't know that I would put a percentage on it, but that seems to be the word around the NHL. At the very least, Blake is going to talk to him about it. And, Blake also said, we're going to talk about how we want to play. And Hiller seemed to indicate, it was interesting. They basically framed it as Hiller has ideas about what we should do, but we didn't have time during the season to implement them. So there's going to be a conversation about what Hiller thinks they should play. And Hiller is a guy who does have some pretty good offensive ideas, from what I understand. Byfield, I'm curious about that one too, Jeff, because obviously he's a cornerstone, and my rule, which is sign them for as long as you can, as quick as you can, because the price never goes down. The interesting thing is the NHLPA just went through 3 agents meetings with all the representatives. One was held in LA, one was held in New York, and one was held in Toronto. And basically what they told them was 5% increase this year, 5% increase or 5% increase this summer for next season, 5% increase the year after in the summer of 2025, as per the CBA. We'll see if there's any wiggle room, but that's what you should expect. And then we'll see. So there are some agents who came out of that saying, what do I do here? Do I sign players who have high ceilings, and Byfield would be one of them, to short-term deals and then wait to see where the cap goes? Or do I just go term now? So it'll be interesting to see how Byfield feels, his reps feel, and the Kings feel. I think if they feel that he's as good as he is, do it. But, there's two sides to this. Kaliev is clearly getting dealt. It's the best outcome for the player. Blake was pretty blunt when talking about that. But it's, like I said, it's the best outcome for the player. They didn't use him, and he needs to go kickstart his career somewhere else. Obviously, I think they'll look at the goalie market. see what they want to do there. But again, like this whole thing to me is, it's on. People keep on saying, "Oh, the Kings got to give Dubois better wingers." It's on Dubois too. He has to show them that he is the player that they paid for, and that to me is the number one thing that they have to deal with this summer. Is how are they going to unlock him? Because do the Kings deserve some criticism? Absolutely, they do, but the player deserves criticism too. So you have to work together to find this solution, because for the next 2 years, I believe he's their highest paid player in terms of actual cash. So anytime you put a player in that position, if he doesn't produce, it's very, very hard to overcome that. So I know the Kings fans are not happy and they see different problems, but for me, the linchpin to them getting better is him getting to his potential.
I wonder if he goes back to the wing. I really do. I wonder if, and Blake talked about this at the presser, how close Byfield was to becoming a full-time center with the Los Angeles Kings. I really do wonder. I mean, listen, Pierre-Luc Dubois enjoyed a lot of success for a long time in junior hockey playing wing. It was the Columbus Blue Jackets, really, that kind of made him the full-time center with that organization, and it's just kind of stuck. I wonder if at least to start next season, they look for Pierre-Luc Dubois on the wing. But we'll see. We'll see when we get there. With coaches this week, we have to talk about Rick Bowness, who called it a career, and what a marvelous career it was. Finishing up with the Winnipeg Jets, a number of stops along the way. When we think hockey lifer, we think Rick Bowness. When we think about all the different players that he's helped on the ice, off the ice, you and I talked about his work with Victor Hedman when he was a young player with the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. Rick Bowness calls it a career. We suspect that Scott Arniel will be the next head coach there in Winnipeg. Nothing official yet as we record this. Your thoughts on Rick Bowness, Bones, calling it a career, Freach?
A coaching career, because I think he could end up in television.
Maybe
not
sitting next to you and Bieksa, in between you and Bieksa?
Well, why not? Not full-time, but part-time. I could see it. I think he's got a lot to offer. And because the thing is, Jeff, every time I ever talk to Rick Bowness, I learn something. He's a good teacher. And you talked about it with players, but he was also a very good teacher for broadcasters. Can you explain to me why you're doing this or what you're thinking here? And he was more wordy than I am sometimes, which is hard to believe, but you always felt that you were getting something, right? And I really like that about him. He as you heard him yesterday, he just loves hockey. He loves talking about hockey. He loves being around hockey. So I can't ever see him not there. Like, I wonder if also he becomes maybe a consultant for some team, just because I'd always want his notes. I'd want to know I can call him and talk to him and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? The one thing I was happiest about for him is his first year as an NHL head coach was part of a season in Winnipeg, 28 games. That doesn't count. But his second year as a head coach was the 91-92 Boston Bruins. And they went to the Stanley Cup semifinal before they got beaten by that juggernaut Pittsburgh team. And you think that you're set, and the Boston Bruins fired him that summer, and they replaced him with Brian Sutter. So you're sitting there and you're thinking, I just got to the Stanley Cup Finals, and what just happened to me? So he goes into the first itineration of the Ottawa Senators, and that was set up for failure. Everybody knows that now. They just weren't going to be successful in the short term. He won 39 games in 3.5 years. And he got another brief chance with the Islanders, and he got another brief chance with the Coyotes. And then he became a very successful assistant coach for a long time in Vancouver and Tampa and Dallas. And I remember in Tampa, we had a conversation. He said, do you ever think that I'll get another chance? And at the time, he had to be 60 years old, right around there. And at that time, Jeff, you're internally, like, you're thinking, I don't know, like, I don't know if that's going to happen. But I thought about it and I asked around, and he wanted it so badly, and he got it in the most challenging of situations when Dallas had to move on from Jim Montgomery in the middle of a season, and he ran with it. And that was the thing I was happiest for, because you look at all the situations where he was head coach. You would have thought in his first full stop, he would have had a run in Boston. And instead, it set him on this trajectory where each situation seemed to be weirder or more challenging than the previous one. And I was just happy for him that he got another chance to have a run. He got to a Stanley Cup final. I know he loved coaching the Jets. I'm happy he got that chance. I really am.
I'm with you about the teaching. In the couple of interviews that we did with him here on the podcast, you walk away from it saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I understand the game better from having spoken to Rick Bowness. So listen, congratulations on a wonderful career. Hockey lifer is a term we like to talk about a lot here on this podcast, and Rick Bowness certainly fits that bill. Just don't take all of our jobs in television. Okay. The Vegas Golden Knights and Jonathan Marchessault. It seems as if interest is mutual. Much like anything with Vegas, though, how do you do it, Elliotte?
Well, it's very clear to me after what Kelly McCrimmon and Jonathan Marchessault said at the exit interviews, and I believe this to be true, they're going to take a run at this. And they're going to take a run at this pretty quickly. And when Vegas decides they're going to do something, they either get it done or do everything possible short of that. So we should be on alert for the possibility this actually does occur. And then we have to see what happens around it. As I said the other day, I think Stevenson's going to be a challenge for them. Not impossible, but I think it's going to be a challenge for them. Marchessault, he confirmed something that I'd heard, but you never want to put words in people's mouth, especially down the stretch of a season. But the word on Marchessault was he had kind of indicated internally that he thought he might be done there. And he did say that was going through his mind. But now with the season over, Vegas basically has 7 weeks here to figure out how to do it. And so we'll see where this goes. It's going to take juggling, but when player wants to stay and team wants to stay, especially that team, if they say we want someone, they really want someone, I think we should be prepared for a serious run at it here.
Okay, so it's been an interesting week for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the week's not even over. And who knows what's going to happen between now and when we see management sit down and address the media on Friday. A particular note there, Brendan Shanahan is scheduled to speak. Now, anything stand out to you from either Sheldon Keefe's media availability? I mean, it seemed quite obvious that right out of the gate he talked about this is a results-oriented business, and we haven't gotten the results, and I take full responsibility for that. Like right away, he just dove on it. I know that Mitch Marner. The comments about, being perceived as gods in the market didn't exactly go over well in some corners, but players are emotional. It's a couple of days after a loss. I don't take a whole lot. I don't read into too much about what players.
I'm not going to be attacking Marner for this.
Yeah. Did anything stand out to you from Monday or Tuesday from the Maple Leafs?
Jeff, I think I have a little bit of a better idea of why this week is unfolding as it is. The players and Sheldon Keefe had their availabilities on Monday. I think Wednesday is an important day in terms of meeting and planning in the organization. Like, I don't know exactly who's all going to be in this. I don't know exactly when it's all going to happen, but I do think that Wednesday is a day where they're really going to start to drill down on where things are going to go here over the next little while. I think you have to get over the emotion of the situation. Everybody wanted to wait a couple of days, but now it's time to start moving everything forward. One thing I believe, the NHL, Tuesday was draft lottery day. I don't think the league wanted a lot of news on that day. Ottawa's coaching situation had gotten out, so they kind of understood, okay, that one, but I don't think they wanted too much there to interfere with the Celebrini celebration. Also, Sheldon Keefe was inducted into the Brampton Sports Hall of Fame on Tuesday night, and I think the Maple Leafs also, too, are very sensitive of that. But I think Wednesday is going to be the day where they really start to meet and go over what's coming, and I think that's why the availability was pushed from Thursday to Friday, because you meet Wednesday, maybe you have to make some short-term decisions on Thursday, let everybody know, and then meet the media on Friday. So I think that's where we're kind of are with the Maple Leafs, and I think that, like I said, Wednesday is going to be a meeting day. The thing about Brad Treliving is he's not a guy who likes to overreact quickly. He likes to think. He likes to ponder. And that's not a bad thing. I'll tell you this. Like a couple of years ago, there was a GM. I said something about one team that I felt that they were dragging it out with their coach. And someone from that organization called me and they were mad. They said, you're saying I'm not being fair to that coach. I've got to be right to my organization. I have to make sure I make the most thorough decision. And I have to say to myself, okay, if not that coach, then who? And I have to do the most thorough job to determine if this is my coach or not. So I don't like it, especially that there's a hiring cycle going on right now, Jeff. I don't like that these things take time. But the organization is simply going to say to me, we have to do this right. And Treliving is not a guy who likes to rush to judgment. So we'll see what the timeline is here. I've got to think by the fact they're not talking until Friday for a reason. And I'm not ready to jump to any conclusions yet on what this all means, but they're not talking until Friday for a reason. And I suspect one of those things is to make sure that they feel they're making the right decision at coach. So that's number one. Treliving is going to want, when he kept Keefe last year, one of the first things he did was, if I'm going to make the change, who's better? So I have no doubt he's going through that. Number two, the fans are mad at the players saying we're so close. I thought Riley's answer about we're close, but also we're still very far because we've only won one round. I thought that was the fairest answer. I understand why the fans hate that. I do. I just don't know what else the players can be expected to say. Like they defended Marner. They're not going to dump all over each other, but I think everybody understands the overall frustration, which is why we are where we are. I had some real interesting conversations about Marner, and a couple people reminded me, Darren Ferris, the agent, he likes to take people to UFA. And they said that based on that, people believe that he will say to Marner, you've earned your UFA status, wait for it. Now, maybe that might change. Maybe Marner will feel differently. Who knows what'll happen here. But his base advice is usually that. Now, Nick Kyprios, who's been very good on Marner information over the last few years, said that he thinks they will discuss the possibility of being moved, and he may turn out to be right, but that has historically been Ferris's advice. That is true. And a few people warned me there's going to be a lot of posturing here, and you better be careful what you believe or you don't believe, which is true. Look, this team is waiting until Friday for a reason, and the reason is they probably want to sort out some things. So like I said, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, and we'll see where we go over the next couple of days. But I will tell you privately, Jeff.
Yes.
There's been some wild stuff out there. Yeah. And, you're just chasing it down. And right now, there's not, as we sit here and we do this pod, there's nothing that appears to be true.
Should we raise any type of eyebrow? I know you've just said you're not going to get led into this, but here I am trying to lead you into this. Do we raise any type of eyebrow that it's going to be Keith Pelly, Brendan Shanahan, and Brad Treliving speaking on Friday?
And I think you raise the eyebrow that all three are there. The only thing is, and I don't want people to go wild with this, even though I know they will. I'm going to regret saying this. But remember the Sabres, it was like, we're going to have Kevin Adams and Don Granato, and then they made a coaching change, right? So just because a team announces something doesn't mean it's going to end up that way. I should say that it doesn't mean it won't. It's just that the fact that look, if everything was so easy to figure out, they would have done their media conference Monday or Tuesday. So it's clear there's something they're working at here, and there's things they're considering at here that are saying, you know what, we're going to take the full week to do this. But I think you have to be prepared for the fact that something can change.
Elliotte, before we get to the break and on the other side, the Montana's Thought Line, quick shout out to a couple of Western Hockey League teams that just gave us an incredible 7-game series, 6 of which went into overtime. Congratulations to the Moose Jaw Warriors for winning Game 7 in overtime. 3-2 is the final, and congratulations to the Saskatoon Blades. These two teams, Elliotte, gave us a tremendous 7-game series where 6 went into overtime. Can you imagine what everybody must have been going through? You talk about an emotional roller coaster. That was that series. Want to point out as well, the game-winning goal in overtime scored by Atlee Calvert, who is, by the way, someone who was born in Moose Jaw, raised in Moose Jaw, now plays for the Moose Jaw Warriors. Ladies and gentlemen, that is rare. Elliotte, his brother Rowan plays on the Saskatoon Blades.
Oh, tough, I didn't know that. Wow.
Family moment in the Western Hockey League on Tuesday night. The one son is a hero. The other one is crushed. Anyhow, congratulations to the Moose Jaw Warriors there. Now, Moose Jaw will face off against Portland for the championship of the Western Hockey League. In the queue, we have Baie-Comeau facing off against Drummondville. And in the Ontario Hockey League, it's a couple of classics. The London Knights facing off against the Oshawa Generals.
Wow.
Good luck to all. Good luck to all.
All that needs is the Toronto Marlboros somewhere, and I would remember it from my childhood. Has there ever been a series where all 7 games went to overtime? I mean, I was following it in Colby Armstrong's Twitter.
That. I was thinking about that. I don't know. I can't remember one that went 7 overtimes. I mean, we've seen goofy 7-game series before. Was it 92 American Hockey League, St. John's facing off against Adirondack, and every road team, and that was the final, Calder Cup, and the road team won every single game. Congratulations to Adirondack, Barry Melrose's team. But I don't know that I've seen a 7-game series where they all went to overtime. I mean, I'm sure it's happened somewhere in hockey. I just don't have that at instant recall here. Have you heard of anything like that?
I don't remember a series where all 7 games went to overtime. I don't. I'm sure if it happened, someone out there was going to tell us about it, but I don't remember it.
Okay, we'll take a quick break. Montana's Thought Line on the other side. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to the podcast. Time now for the Montana's Thought Line. Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue.
Try the ribs. Try the ribs. You got to try ribs.
Thank you, Rick Turner. 32 Thoughts at Sportsnet.ca. 1-833-311-3232. 32 Thoughts at Sportsnet.ca. 1-833-311-3232. Elliotte, we're going to start with Jesse from Annapolis, Maryland. Hello, gents. Flames fan transplanted into
Naval
Annapolis.
Academy.
Yes, transplanted into Annapolis, Maryland. Was listening to the pod today and appreciate all the info. You were discussing the potential of Mike Sullivan and John Cooper's availability later in the summer. My question is this. I know John Gruden was traded from Oakland to Tampa. Has that ever happened in the NHL? Coach trades, Elliotte.
Well, you on your radio show the other day mentioned Michel Bergeron.
Yes.
He was traded for a first-round pick, right, from Quebec to the Rangers.
So this is a fascinating one. This, I believe, Elliot, was the only time this has happened in the history of the NHL. I stand to be corrected on this one, but I believe that is the only time this has happened. It was 1987. The general managers involved, Phil Esposito of the New York Rangers and Maurice Filion of the Quebec Nordiques. So Filion trades Michel Bergeron to the New York Rangers for a first-round pick and $75,000 in cash. And the Nordiques turned that pick into someone I thought was going to be dynamite in the NHL, and I was way off, and that was Daniel Doré. Remember big, strong defenseman Daniel Doré?
Because Daniel Doré later became a Ranger scout. So when I saw him there,
nice.
I remembered that he was part of that trade.
So that whole thing started off as a joke. So Phil Esposito apparently was at the draft in Detroit talking to Filion and said like, hey, why don't you trade me your coach? And expecting Filion to laugh. And instead, Filion said, let's talk. Now, I've never been able to confirm this. Maybe you know this. But apparently the Michel Bergeron-Maurice Filion relationship turned really bad after Filion traded Dale Hunter to Washington because Bergeron loved Dale Hunter. Now, the first round pick, they ended up turning into Joe Sakic. But that's what I was always told that was very much in question here. And that's what soured Filion on Michel Bergeron, was a Dale Hunter trade. Bergeron wanted to keep him. Filion wanted to trade him. Now, the other thing we should mention as well, and Elliot, you'll know this one well, you used to have to compensate teams when you took their coach.
That was a few years ago, and the reason that ended was because when Gary Bettman told the teams that he was going to allow them to do that, he said, this better not turn into a problem. I do not want to mediate difficulties or I'll get rid of this. And it almost immediately turned into a problem. Yes. And one of the cases that was a flashpoint was Peter Chiarelli from Boston to Edmonton, because in that particular case, the Oilers and some other teams said compensation was only supposed to be if someone still had a job, right? Peter Chiarelli was fired from Boston. The Oilers asked to speak to him, and when they hired him, the Bruins demanded compensation. And the Oilers said, no, that's not what this is about. It's about he's no longer your GM. We can take him for that job. And the Bruins said, nope, he's under contract, and that's the way we read it. So almost immediately there was a problem, and Bettman eventually got rid of it. And the funny thing about that was there were some teams who sided with the Oilers, there were some teams who sided with the Bruins, but I remember one guy at the time said, this is going to end it all. And he was right. Like Bettman just said, no. Now, Jeff, there's one other case I would like to bring up because someone I know heard you talking about this and said there is another case since Bergeron Doré. And they said it wasn't specifically a trade, but if you go back and look at it, it was part of a process that the NHL had to approve. When Mike Keenan left the Rangers after winning the Stanley Cup in '94 for the St. Louis Blues, it was an incredibly messy divorce.
There were
some
conversations about how that.
That ended up with Gary Bettman moderating it. And as part of allowing Keenan to go to the Blues, Peter Nedved was traded from the Rangers for Doug Lidster and Esa Tikkanen. So while technically that was a hockey trade,
good point,
it was all approved as part of the same package that Bettman said, this is what it's going to take to solve all this. So while technically Keenan was not traded for Nedved, the trade was allowed as part of letting Keenan go to the Blues.
That was, let's just say, an interesting time in New York Rangers history.
Yes,
with, with Mike Keenan. But great call and great catch there. Mark, hello, Jeff and Elliotte. While I know the situation didn't warrant it, when Draisaitl got hauled down going for the empty net, it got me thinking, if a player commits an infraction that it warrants a penalty shot while his team's net is empty, does the penalized team get to return the goalie to the net for the penalty shot? Thanks, love the show. You want to knock that one down?
Yes, you do get to put your goalie back in the net. You don't have God challenging the penalty shot.
Jerry from
Good question,
Adelaide.
simple
Very good.
answer.
Jerry from Adelaide, formerly Waterloo. Good day from Adelaide. Love the pod. Huge fan of the article, and the pod has become necessary listening as I do my walks on the beach. Oh, rub it in, Jerry. Okay, so Jerry goes on, amongst a couple of other things he talks about here and rubs it in our face about where he lives and we don't. He has a question about after Zach Hyman scored his hat trick and a flood of hats hitting the ice. The point of his email, here's what he says. I got asked, what do they do with all the hats they collect and put into the bins? This is him watching hockey, I'm assuming in Adelaide, with a bunch of people who weren't necessarily hockey fans but had this question. He says, I've been around hockey for 40 years, always loved the tradition of hat throwing, but never have I asked the question, what happens to the hats? I was stumped. Do the players get them? Would they want someone's sweaty hat? Did they go to charity? Do the fans collect them back? If so, how? Given the NHL/NHLPA constantly advertising their NHL green, hopefully they aren't going to a landfill. Anyway, a quick Google search didn't yield a satisfactory answer. Hence, I throw to you boys, the experts. Keep up the great work, boys. Special shout out to Dom for continuously herding the cats and keeping the boys on track. Try the ribs, but also check your tire pressure. There you go. All right, Jerry from Adelaide. What happens to the hats, Elliotte?
A lot of them get donated. I've seen this year that in some of Hyman's cases where he had hat tricks, he's donated them to some local shelters or charities. I know that happens. There are some teams. Someone told me, I don't know who it is, but someone told me there are some teams that say that if you can identify your hat, we'll give it back to you. I heard, I didn't know this, but I was told this. But Hyman had a hat trick late in the year, and there were like 1,000 of them thrown on the ice, and they showed the pictures in all the bags. It was really quite incredible, and the Oilers donate them. They donate them to charities or shelters or things like that. One of the funniest things I ever heard, Jeff, was, this is probably about 20, 25 years ago. Sports Illustrated did a story on, for example, when a team wins the Super Bowl. I think they were doing it for football, whether it was the college football championship or the Super Bowl. You know, they have hats and shirts like Patriots win Super Bowl, Patriots Super Bowl champions. So somebody got the idea. What happens to, like, for example, the Patriots won their first Super Bowl beating the Rams. What happens to the Rams hats and shirts? Because obviously they're not giving those out.
Yeah.
And
overseas, right?
Yeah, donated to needy countries, for example, and they track some to Africa, countries that needed clothing, places like that around the world. I thought that was a great story. It's one of those stories you read it and you're like, damn it, I wish I'd thought of that idea.
I love it because, in a lot of countries that, need the clothing, whether it's the hats, the shirts, there's like an alternative sports universe that's existing where there's all these champions that never happened. And
that never won.
That I'm in love with the alternative sports universe. And that just hits me right in the, oh yeah, give me some of that. Like you're telling me, like if you had a chance to have a Rams Super Bowl shirt, Elliotte, or hat, you wouldn't wear that one proudly?
I would wear it, and when they eventually won, I would say, told you. Yeah. So the Rams won the Super Bowl before they lost to the Patriots, but then they won the Super Bowl again with Matthew Stafford and Aaron Donald 20 years later. So I would have pulled out the shirt 20 years later and said, told you.
I love it. Thanks for that email. The Montana's Thought Line. Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue. We're back in a moment.
Jeff, Elliotte, and Tom on 32 Thoughts. Try the ribs today. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation. Elliotte wrapping up another pod, reminding people tonight's two big games. Boston Bruins facing off against the Florida Panthers. Boston leads this series 1-0, as everybody predicted. And we finally get to see the Edmonton Oilers face off against the Vancouver Canucks. Bracket that one for a second. I want to finish with that. But initially, the Boston Bruins look to take a 2-0 series lead on the road over the Florida Panthers. Elliotte, what gives?
First of all the credit to the Bruins, and particularly Dad Energy Brandon Carlo, and Jeremy Swayman, who's been phenomenal to start the playoffs.
Are we doing Conn Smythe? Are we doing Conn Smythe Trophy watch already? Are we already handing this thing over to Jeremy?
Oh, okay, I'm not Anthony Stewart. Okay. We do it on the first night of the playoffs. He's my Conn Smythe leader. The thing about Swayman is, like, now I'm riding him until he tires. Monday was the first time he's ever played 6 games in a row. It's the first time he's ever played 6 games in 13 days, and he was great. So I'm just going with him now. Like I told you, I would have started Ullmark in game 1, and Kevin said he would have started Ullmark in game 2 regardless. Nah, I'm just going with him until he's tired. Go, go, go. They were the far better team in game 1. I was really impressed with their game, and a lot of depth scoring. Like that Lorei looks like a real steal. 14th defenseman taken in that draft. A lot of good D ahead of him, but that's a real steal for them. I think you know what really stood out to me, Jeff, is I thought they were relaxed. I thought they got stressed as that series against Toronto went on. There was a lot of stress around both those teams, obviously, but I thought it really affected the Bruins, and that was the first unstressed game I saw them play in about 4 or 5 games. They were free. It was a little bit of playing with house money for them. And I think the Carlo thing also gave them something that kind of jolted them and exciting them. Like when he showed up, all of the high fives he got, they had a new energy. I can't imagine that Florida is going to be that bad again. I love what, Maurice had a couple of good days of quotes. First of all, he defended Marner on the play, the game-winning goal. Something that Andrew Brewer pointed out in his excellent article on Sportsnet.ca. And secondly, he said, yeah, Ekblad had a rough night, but he's going to be a lot better. And I suspect a lot of their players will be better too. And also, it's looking like Sam Bennett's getting pretty close. And he's going to add some piss and vinegar to the series.
For sure. I do wonder if that gets moved along after losing game 1. Like if Florida Panthers would have won that first game, would there be a pressure on for Sam Bennett to come back? Probably not. I do see the point about Aaron Ekblad, and that was kind of a weird turnover off the boards on the Morgan Geekie goal. Like that was I don't know, that was bizarre, and I think we do expect more out of Aaron Ekblad in game 2 and subsequent. A couple of other things. Your thoughts on, I really like Justin Brazeau. I know you guys talk a lot about him on TV, and for good reason. That 4-1 goal, like what a great big man power move that was to the net. And he does it all the time. It doesn't always work, but I don't know. That game 1 to me was like, well, first of all, the Jeremy Swayman show. And number 2, that was all about defense and depth scoring. Morgan Geekie, Justin Brazeau, Jake DeBrusk, I know is not exactly a depth guy. He's a top guy, but he chimes in with the 5-1 empty net goal there. That to me was a really good, solid effort. And it wasn't just the regular starring cast like Brad Marchand and David Pasternak, etc., Charlie McAvoy, that were getting it done for the Boston Bruins. Good win. Really, really good win by the Boston Bruins. Now we get to the all-Canadian matchup. Vancouver Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers. If for no other reason than this, we can just calm everybody down at least a little bit, or let everyone come up and have a breath on social media, we finally get game 1, Elliotte. What are you looking for in this series?
I'm looking for the provinces of Alberta and British Columbia to fall into the earth and completely disappear in anger at each other.
I get the feeling we're already close, even before puck drop, Elliotte. I'm not going to lie to you.
You're 100% right.
We're right
we talked
there.
about it the other day. It's not going to take much to push this. It's over. I can't wait for the series to start. I think it's going to be an incredible series. I think the Canucks players believe that Shilovs can give them enough goaltending to keep them in the games. And they know it's on them to protect him. I think this is going to be incredible hockey. Who did Draisaitl say they wanted to beat this year? To you at All-Star?
Vancouver Canucks.
He pointed out how they'd manhandled them earlier this year. So look, Jeff, you don't need any more motivation at this time of year. A trip to the Western Conference Final is enough, but you can already feel it boiling.
Yeah, that's good.
A watched pot never boils.
Nah.
That's a lie here, Jeff. We're watching this pot and it's boiling right in front of us. I can't wait for it to start.
It's going to be great. Enjoy it. You got the 2 games tonight. We'll talk all about it. You'll hear from us again first thing Friday morning. Enjoy the hockey. We're back in a couple of days. Thanks for listening once again to 32 Thoughts, the podcast.